Hello friends, it's Kayla. I am moments away from finding out the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards in the romance category. This is my first year reading adult romance with intention. If you've just stumbled here, you are on the tail end of a week-long romance vlog series. In the past week, I've read these 21 romance books, all selected for me in different ways. I chose it, the community chose it, paid professionals chose it. I implore you to go catch up on that first, so there will be a playlist down below full of all of my reactions, learnings, lessons. And I have already found some 5-star favorites, so that's incredible. And now it's just time for some fun and to read the most popular romance of the year. If you don't already know, the Goodreads Choice Awards is an end-of-year celebration of all the most popular books of 2022. There are different voting categories starting on November 20th when 20 romance books entered the competition. So we're gonna throw it back to that day first to find out my reaction to all of the nominees. I just ran through them in a live show with my channel members, so let's go back to that footage and then start the reading. Today's the day we're going to look for the first time together and find out all of the nominees. Now, the last couple weeks or months, I have been preparing for this moment, and I can't go over all of my predictions because I just reserved every 2022 romance that I saw from my local library. We're going to get 20 nominees. Like you've seen in the other vlogs, it's 5 books a video. So this one should also be 5 books. So I'll read at least 5, but maybe a little bit more. I feel like I want to wait until the winners are announced, and I will guarantee reading the first and second place. But then I want to just pick 2 out of the 20 that just sound interesting to me. I think that's fair. And then I also want to pick 2 from this story where I asked you to disrecommend books to me, and most people chose authors specifically. So I feel like if any of the top like 3 authors who I got told I absolutely should never read, if they show up in the awards, I'm gonna read them. And according to your comments, which I'm looking at now, the #1 mentioned person is Tessa Bailey. I don't know who that is, and I don't even know if I have her book, if there is a book from her this year or if it's in my bag. And then also Penelope Douglas is showing up a lot, and Ali Hazelwood. This bag, I also don't know what any of these books are. Like, I haven't looked in the synopsis. Let us find the romance. We've got The Bodyguard. Oh, she's the bodyguard. Good for her. Electric Idol by Katie Robert. I definitely have heard of her. This is the second book in a series. Did you read the first one? Did you love it? We've got Terms and Conditions. It doesn't look like a romance. Like, this looks like a romance. There's 2 people. Love on the Brain. 125,000 ratings. All 4 of these I recognize. After serving 5 years in prison, The Kiss Curse. This is a sequel. This is The Wedding Crasher. A hilarious rom-com about 2 strangers who just got trapped in a lie and have to fake date their way out of it. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I've heard of that. Things We Never Got Over. Bearded bad boy barber Knox prefers to live his life the way he takes his coffee, alone. Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen. I didn't know that was romance. Funny You Should Ask. Dating Dr. Dill. A love-phobic TV doctor. Wait, if Shakespeare was an auntie, I like Shakespeare. Twisted Hate by Anna Huang. Oh, Spanish Love Deception #2. Interesting. Sequel. It Starts With Us. Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. A quick Mezzi. Incredible. Love that author. And then Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. The live show's over. I'm a little surprised by some of the romance category. There was a lot here that didn't make it. There was some things I'd never heard of. Lots to consider. So here's what just happened. I have already read 6 2022 releases in this video series. 2 of them did show up on the Goodreads list, so I've already read 2 out of the 20. These 2 weren't on there, which is not surprising. These 2, I was surprised to not see on there. Then of the 20 the Goodreads listed, I predicted over half of them. 7 of them I have right here, and I think 4 of them I knew would be on here, but I couldn't get my hands on. Like, the library holds were way too long. So there's one by Carly Fortune, the ones by Colleen Hoover, and The Kiss Curse, because I think it just came out. Now, the books that I was wrong about There's a big stack of them. This isn't even all of them. This is the ones that I just read the synopsis and I'm not really interested in. But then these 7, the synopsis intrigued me in all of them, and I'm disappointed to not see them. I think I would have enjoyed reading some paranormal romance, witches and ghosts. These ones are about books. I talked about the roughest draft earlier. Like, I really wanted to read this. And then these 3 just sound really fun. I heard a pitch for the hookup plan say that it was enemies with benefits, and it just sounded so fun. So I'm gonna have to do something with these. Now, as far as what I said before about reading the winners, I do feel like that's just the right way for me to do this. I need to read the most popular. That's the whole goal of this last episode. And I feel like it'll probably be down to book lovers and reminders of him, but I'm gonna wait until the winners are announced. And in the meantime, I've got the 2 authors you told me not to read, Tessa Bailey and Ali Hazelwood. And I just think it's gonna be fun for me to find out why. Now, as far as just picking 2 that I'm interested in, I have these ones, but I can also go out and buy any of these that I want. I would say right now, The Bodyguard intrigues me. Now, obviously it's about an actor, but they're fake dating. We also have The Wedding Crasher, which I found out in the live is about, oh yeah, it's fake dating. I remember putting it in the back of my head as like, that's one that you'd be interested in. Oh, and if this isn't in the top 2, I will still read it. I'm just assuming it will be. It's small town, it's about books. I read an Emily Henry already in this week's series, and I think it could be good. Right now, I think I'm good with these choices. I need to return all of these other books immediately to the library, so I'll check in with you when I start something. All right, we're kicking this whole thing off with Hook, Line, and Sinker, which really doesn't feel like it fits with the atmosphere whatsoever. I was hoping there would be some type of holiday romance in here. This looks like a summer romance, and the world is covered in snow. I'm wearing a chunky knit sweater, and I'm drinking a chai. But perhaps this will be the perfect atmosphere to read this in because it's summertime, and it'll make me feel warm. Now, this morning I read the first 14 pages, which are a compilation of text messages between Hannah and Fox, who I guess are 2 people who met in this book. It happened one summer. It seems like they had a couple different encounters when the other 2 were falling in love, but they were told to like stay away from each other. But now they have spent from September all the way through to March texting each other like every day, and now they're friends. And Fox has never had a female friend before, and Hannah is in love with her director. She's a production assistant, but she thinks she's getting feelings for Fox. Fox Thornton is a king crab fisherman, and apparently this takes place in Washington. The opening little bit just sounded very much like East Coast vibes, but we are on the West Coast. Hannah lives in Los Angeles, I think. Everyone knows Fox is a guaranteed good time. Now Hannah's in town for work, crashing in Fox's spare bedroom. And I'm just interested to know why people would steer me away from Tessa Bailey. Everything on here says it's romantic comedy, it's delightful, it's heartwarming. Oh, interesting. It says she lives in Long Island, New York. Why wouldn't she have just set this on the East Coast? Just the description of like the fishermen, the small town vibes, it just didn't sound like the West Coast that I know. Anyway, I'm out doing some Christmas shopping right now. I might pop in the audiobook and I'll update you soon. Okay, so I did grab this, reminders of him, because it was on sale and I figured I might as well. I wanted to grab Dating Dr. Dill, and I can't explain why, but I just thought I would pick it up. Actually, you know, one reason why I found the romance category very lacking in diversity, and when I thought of the ones that I had already grabbed, I realized that the ratio of things that I had picked up, I needed to add a little bit more. Also, anything Shakespeare related, I'm gonna get it. I've officially reached the 100-page mark. I feel like this book is doing a fantastic job of explaining everything that happened in the first book. And so I feel like I fully understand their dynamic. There's a little bit of a fake dating, make another man jealous kind of storyline, which I like. And at this point, they're very much trying to deny their feelings for one another. This definitely feels like a one-day read, so I'm gonna go inside, put away all my groceries, and read some more. I guess you could say I'm not quite sold on Fox. Now I'm parsing the scene, but essentially she's like, what's your favorite thing about the ocean? And he goes, 1 year, the crabs are in one place, The next they're in another. I'm trying to figure out how old this girl is, because she has the music taste of like someone in their 30s. Me. It's interesting how she wants to move from her position into like just controlling the music for the entire movie. And I wonder if she knows like it involves a little bit more than just like picking the perfect song, like popular commercial song that you already enjoyed. I'm scared. He goes, I could smell the oil, Hannah. I'm not gonna give you context for that. Good Lord. No, no. I don't trust the language that I'm about to witness, because she's already referred to his crotch as the eye of the storm. I need a break. Sorry, I couldn't update you any further while I was reading it. I'm done. Oh boy, am I done. Actually, I'm giving this 3 stars. It's not getting the worst rating because it didn't do anything to super bother me. I just didn't like it. I didn't like my time here. I flew through it rather quickly. An entire star is removed for the dirty talk. Good Lord, it was uncomfortable. For this man to be supposedly just like this promiscuous playboy, sleeps with every person he meets kind of guy, like, did not get those vibes. And I was definitely missing the calm in the rom-com. Nothing was funny in here, unless you consider how we ran out of euphemisms by the end, and I think referred to her femininity milking him. He also referred to her vagina as her thing too many times to count, and I just couldn't help but hear it in my head as like, open that thing. Show me that thing. What this book is supposed to be about is a girl who doesn't see herself as the main character of her own life because of her sister overshadowing her, her job, her not getting everything that she wants out of life, so she wants to have her main character moment. She always feels like a supporting character. And unfortunately, by the end of the book, she's still the supporting character. It's just to this guy instead. She has to act as his therapist the entire time. And I get that he has been through stuff and his upbringing has really impacted him because he's never been able to see himself as, you know, better than his like player father. And so he over-sexualizes women before they can over-sexualize him. And he's emotionally, sexually, romantically unavailable in so many different facets, but doesn't really fully acknowledge everything and like work to fix it. Is just like constantly fucking up, and Hannah has to like talk him through it every time. The last 100 pages of this was absolutely exhausting. Like, for the like compared to other things that I've read, the actual dramatic things aren't as dramatic in here, but they act as if they are. The angst just got so high and for so long. I also am really not personally looking for an epilogue that's 10 years in the future, though I see how that would be satisfying for so many people. So that's not a flaw. I'm gonna read something next that I think that I could like. Hello. I don't know that I can still pull off like hot pink with this hair color, but don't tell me in the comments below because it's none of my business. I made a mistake of starting both of these last night because I wanted to know which one I was interested in, and now I think I've mixed them up with each other because they both are about a relationship of convenience. I think in Dating Dr. Dill, there was 2 people and they both are deciding to be together because they need money. I think she wants to buy her childhood home and he wants to extend his like practice. I think they need to be married in order to like get money in some form of like grant or gift from, ooh, it was from her dad for her wedding, but she's gonna use it for a house. Now, The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa started out very, haven't you people ever heard of Closing the Goddamn Door? It takes place at a wedding. She is the wedding crasher because she walks in on the bride hooking up with another guy and she stops the wedding. And now I think she is gonna get together with the groom, which is okay because it was a relationship of convenience for the people getting married. And now it's gonna be a relationship of convenience between them. She, I think, wanted to just get her family off her back, trying to set her up with people. I might be wrong. And he it was about his job. So like they'll take him more seriously if he has a partner. He doesn't want to show any vulnerability because his wedding just like got called off. And so his bosses and colleagues, he's a lawyer, are looking at him like, oh, I'm going to take his spot. I'm going to take his clients, because who is he without a successful relationship? So he lies and he's like, oh no, I started a new relationship with this woman. And I don't think they've interacted since the thing happened at the wedding. So I love wedding stories, but the wedding has already happened. This one says it's a hilarious rom-com. This one says it's a hilarious treat. We'll see if I laugh. See that? Now that's a smile. That is what a rom-com is supposed to do. I'm halfway through basically every scene. I've been planning to update you and tell you how much I'm liking it, but I don't want to put it down. So I finally reached the point that I feel like our sexual tension is at its peak. So I'm taking a pause to let you know what's going on. I have read my fair share of fake dating type stories these past months. One has really worked for me. Most are just okay. This is what I want in a fake dating situation. He literally built a dossier so she could get to know him. He was like, here's everything you need to know. Any question anybody will ever think to ask, here's the answer. Here's where I went to school. Here was my favorite pet. Here's my whatever. Dean is me, and Solange is just totally down and along for the journey. They are like perfectly compatible. They end up at this party where, let's just say, they shouldn't be, and the way that they're back and forth just about like getting out of it, they're just so in sync. They both are throwing a lot of sexual innuendos at each other, but pretending like they're not saying anything suggestive. They're meant to be courting this person that he wants to bring into their practice. And so they're ending up on these random dates, and there was one point where they got propositioned by this couple at a bar because they were like trying out their fake dating and if they were believable as a couple, and that scene was just very funny. And at this point it's feeling like a rom-com movie. Like they are in the most ridiculous scenario, and that's what I want from fake dating. I want the people to be super organized and have everything down, and then suddenly they are just thrown into this wild situation and they just have to like go along with it. And then by the end of it, they've just spent this like sentimental time together by accident, and then they find out they actually like each other. We've done it, my friends. We got another 5-star. Now listen, Dean's motivations are definitely a little bit questionable. Like, he's willing to just marry these people to look good at work. But here's the thing, if this was a movie rom-com, none of us would be questioning it. I'm thinking like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, The Proposal, those love interests were also a little unhinged. But there was really only one moment that I was like, okay, when he was sharing a poem. Other than that, cringe level really low. And it was really just a combination of so many of my favorite rom-coms, like the How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days guy who is just so obsessed with his job and people's perspective of him that he gets caught up in weird things. It had the drive me crazy aspect of like a type A and a type B individual scheming together. The really thorough contract of To All the Boys I've Loved Before. The like fake sex scene in Easy A, if you loved that. There was a fun dynamic in here. And also there was like this voyeurism vibe, but the steam and humor were very balanced because it was also very Dial A for Aunties vibes, where like around every corner, the entire family shows up and it's just a ridiculous scene every time. I think my favorite thing about this compared to other books that I've read, and what makes this more of like my perfect rom-com, is they never really betrayed each other. They were understanding of each other. They were communicating the entire time. There wasn't like sneaky things going on. And also they weren't willing to lie to their families. And that's a thing that happens a lot. But their relationship with their parents at times were tension-filled, but were also very warm and loving. And they didn't want their parents to feel deceived, so they let them in on the ruse throughout the story. And it was really their families who were pushing them together, and it was just really sweet. Now that we've had a win, should we go over to something a little bit messy? Now, for all I know, Love on the Brain is going to be 5 stars, but the amount of people vehemently against me reading Allie Hazelwood, I could not be more intrigued. I think the only thing I know about her books is that she writes women in STEM, People have told me she's obsessed with big men and tiny women, which, like, if I'm just reading one book, it's not really a trend for me, so I don't see why that would bother me. And that the love hypothesis is a fan fiction of something to do with Star Wars that I've never seen. So we've got B and Levi. B is getting a job at NASA and Levi already works there, but in grad school, they were arch nemesis. Let me give it a good 100 pages and I'll check in with you. Okay, I got my 100 pages in. I don't know what to say about this book. It's written weirdly, but I don't know how to explain it. It is just written not like any of the traditionally published romances that I've read so far. There's just something off about it, like literally the writing of it. Maybe I'll be able to pinpoint it by the end. I have now learned that the first book had fake dating, so maybe I should have read that. But their dynamic is interesting because she thinks that he hates her, but he clearly doesn't. But every time he goes to tell her he doesn't hate her, she like interrupts him, and it's this big misunderstanding that is driving me a little crazy. I don't know yet why people love it or hate it. I feel nothing. I don't feel like it's done anything particularly interesting. Let's do another 100 pages. There's something really endearing about a woman who is intelligent and capable at work and at her education, but is just a mess when it comes to love. This book is taking it a little too far. Like, she's missing every single signal. She's so dense that I'm starting to dislike her as a human. I feel like he's making his feelings very clear and she's just missing it all. And then I feel the same with Levi. Like, he's likable enough, but I'm starting to question things about him. Like, is he only nice to her and only trying to help her forward her career because he is like in love with her? Like, let's just make him a good guy all around instead, and not because he wants to like sleep with her. Now, Allie Hazelwood, she sure is mentioning their sizes a lot. To the point of distraction more so than being irritating, but it's like every single chapter, she's like, I'm so itty bitty, he's so big, his thighs are so thick, he's so strong, he's so tall, and look at me, I'm just a wee little baby. That's where I'm at. I still feel nothing towards this book. Like, I do not get it. I want it to get good. There was this movement in the late 90s, early 2000s by magazine companies, specifically Cosmo, who always features like a sex-heavy short story at the very end of their magazines. And as a response to the increase of STIs and things like that, they no longer accepted submissions. They would no longer feature stories that didn't have explicit condom use. There we go. This is one from the 80s. Is there nudity on here? No, it's just biscuits. And this was not a thing. If you look back on like Playboy, Cosmo, any of those magazines from like the 80s, it was never a thing. It was never talked about. Another one from the 80s. But if you look at magazines nowadays, they all have condom use. And it just got me thinking, like, should authors, or more specifically publishers, I guess, feel a responsibility to talk about safe sex? And I don't know the answer. On one hand, I don't feel like there should be a hard and fast rule, because then if I said that, I would be a hypocrite, because I also don't feel like authors have a responsibility to the reader, just personally, to only offer perfect, aspirational, unproblematic relationships to the reader. I'm in the write what you want camp. But as a reader who does want explicit and enthusiastic consent, that to me goes beyond the act itself, but what you are being exposed to. I obviously talk about this because there's a scene in here where they don't use condoms, and she specifically says, I'm on birth control. Yet the scene right before, she talked about how her last partner cheated on her with multiple partners. And as they are brand new partners, the fact that there's no conversation about testing or STIs or using a condom for anything other than birth control, I just feel like authors have this fear that talking about testing and STIs takes away like the sexiness. And I would implore those authors to read books where these conversations are done and they're done well, because they happen a lot. What was the last one I read? I want to say it was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. If I as a reader am meant to care about your characters, I also should be caring about their sexual health. This seems like such a nitpicky thing, but hear me out. I have nothing to say about this book, so that's how I'm just gonna wrap it up. There was something explicitly missing from these scenes, and it's not the condom use itself, it's the conversation around it. All in all, I'm giving it a 2.75. I feel almost identical as I did with Hook, Line, and Sinker. I feel like there's nothing objectively wrong with so much of the story, but it didn't do a lot for me. I was only barely cringing. It got absolutely ridiculous at the end. I was not expecting the action movie drama in the lab at the end of this. I would say this felt like reading almost journal entries. That's how I would describe the writing style to me. It also felt very youthful. The way she saw herself, the way she interacted with people, it always felt like she was reflecting on it more so than I was in the scene with her. The winners are going to be announced tomorrow, so we'll see what I'm reading soon. All right, it's now time to find out the winners of the Goodreads Choice Awards. So let's do it. I feel like I know what it's gonna be, and it's Book Lovers. The second one is Reminders of Him. The third one is It Starts With Us. But even with the combined votes that Colleen Hoover got, it wouldn't have beat out Emily Henry. So shout out Emily Henry. Love on the Brain got the 4th place, and then a couple I'm not interested in are next. Then we've got Delilah Green, which I read and enjoyed. The Wedding Crasher, my favorite one, is in the very last spot of all 20. So today we're just gonna get right to it and start Book Lovers. Okay, I am currently like halfway through Book Lovers. I've been just absolutely running through it. I'm currently live with my channel members. We're doing some reading sprints, and I've been listening to the audiobook of this, and it's going very well. If you haven't caught up on the series, I read Beach Read earlier this week. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3.75, and I feel like the dynamic between the two in here are really similar. It's very witty, it's very fun, and this one turned into a little bit more of a sentimental, like fluffy read, which there's nothing wrong with, but I just feel like the love interest kind of lost his personality, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen in here because their banter is fantastic. So we're following this woman named Nora, and she is going to this small town with her sister. She's a literary agent. She's very type A. People call her the shark. She's very intense, takes her job very seriously, very organized, keeps a list of everything she's ever doing. At the very beginning of the book, we get a brief exchange between her and Charlie, an editor. He's not interested in the book. She's trying to get him to edit, and then it becomes a huge bestseller. And now she is spending a month in the small town featured in that book with her little sister. And now these two are going to run into each other again, and a romance is occurring. The first quarter was very much just like sister vibes. There wasn't a lot going on outside of just building the dynamic between them, talking about their childhood, talking about their mother. But now the guy's been introduced, and I really like the vibes. All right, it's 10 p.m. and I am having a hard time reading this book. I've been reading it for so long, and I'm struggling to pick it back up. The last, I think, 150 pages I read physically, and I might switch back to the audiobook for the last 100 because I'm bored. Like, I stopped in the middle of a chapter to paint my nails. That's how bored I am. I feel like if I looked through the general fiction section of the Goodreads Awards, a lot of those books would have just as much romance as this one. Like, it really is about her and her sister and the dynamic and all her internal thoughts and feelings about life. And I feel like there's this kind of like mystery going on with her sister, because her sister is pregnant and is bringing her to this small town, left her 2 kids behind, and clearly wants Nora to experience this like new exciting life for a month. She gave her this checklist to do. It's really fun to follow all the things like go skinny dipping, go on a date with a stranger. All these things are very fun, but Libby is going through her own stuff and won't really let Nora in. And I feel like what is going on with Libby is extremely obvious, but the book is really dragging it out. The romance scenes are good. Like, they are a really good portion of the book, but there's not enough of it. Okay, I finished it. I'm giving it the exact same rating I gave Beach Read, which is a 3.75. They had so much in common. Obviously, they're both about the book world and literature and jobs within it, and then also the banter and the back and forth was like pretty identical, seeing as both books kick off with people who don't really like each other. From what I see on Goodreads, people who like this one and liked Beach Read didn't like People We Met or People We Meet on Vacation, but people who dislike both of those two like this one. So I need to read this one. Not that I disliked it. I think Emily Henry's writing is fantastic. Her dialogue is fantastic. There was small town vibes, a little Gilmore Girls. I appreciated a lot about it. We had a woman who doesn't want to have children. She didn't like magically change her mind when she met the right guy. So that's representation that's definitely needed. I kind of like that it didn't have the perfect happy ending because that's realistic, but it gave you enough good vibes. I just feel like my issue with Beach Read and this are the same. I lost the fun. Charlie became just like the most generic cardboard cutout kind of guy by the end, just like overly sentimental. I could have used some more surprising moments for sure, more fun for sure, and just a little more intrigue because I got a little bored. I think I get why people love it. I liked it. Now, I know there are other books to prioritize at this point, but it has been a couple days and a couple books in between reading the first couple chapters of Dating Dr. Dill and now, so I want to get back into it before I forget the setup. So this morning I got to chapter 10 and they are still debating whether or not to fake date at this point in the book. And I just feel like we're really dragging it out because they're already expressing feelings towards one another and still trying to decide if they want to go in on this scheme to like get money for their respective goals in life, the house, the practice. And I feel like we're going to miss out on all of the fun, like fake dating stuff because they're already so established. I feel like what they should be doing is debating if they actually want to be together. But anyway, this book is a lot ridiculous. It's very over the top and fun. And I feel like I already referenced Dial A for Aunties in relation to one of these books, but this one is also giving me those vibes for sure. Just like very silly scenarios these characters are thrown into, like their initial contact, besides like one brief moment at a bar together where they didn't know who each other were. He runs this talk show and she was in the audience and she ends up like standing up and screaming at him in the middle of his show. It was just very wild. And Karina is set up as a character who you don't really connect with, feel for, besides wanting the best for her just as a human. And you know that her mother meant a lot to her. Her mother has now died and she wants the house that was kind of promised to her, but now she has to jump through all of these hoops. It feels unfair. Her sister is like the priority of the family, and so you feel for her in that way, but as a character she's just very difficult to get on board with. Obnoxious and loud, very little self-awareness, and the setup is very much like she's a 30-year-old woman who nobody wants and her aunties are trying to find her a partner, and like every guy has been like, no, ew, Karina. And yet Dr. Dill meets her and he's like, oh, she's got this sexy librarian thing going, she's so quirky and fun. So it's just that, you know, there's someone for everyone, but setting her up as just like this such undesirable person, I don't know if that's what the book should have done. Anyway, Karina very much believes in love matches, and Prem doesn't really. Dr. Dill, he doesn't believe in love. He talks on his doctor show about how love isn't real. And while at this point they're both showing interest in each other, they just don't feel like they have the right establishment to build a real relationship. So why not a fake one and a marriage of convenience? Okay, hear me out. On one hand, I find these characters terribly inconsistent and I am struggling with it a little bit, especially in the scene I just read. However, on the other hand, the scene I just read, while the cringe level is at like a 5 out of 10, and this book is very much testing my ability to endure dirty talk, it was also just very well done. I'm just struggling with really getting a grasp of these characters' personalities because, you know, in this scene, in the shed, for example, at the end of it, they feel very close. She is very like insecure at the end of it, like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Should I fake date? Like, I need to really think about this. They're just having this very gentle, intimate, vulnerable moment. And then literally the next line, she looks straight at him, her eyes cool, her voice strong, and she goes, you'll wait for me as long as I ask, because now you're invested. Like, that's how the voice was in my head. And it just feels like a huge leap from literally the sentence before when she was like, I don't know what I want. Like, I need more time. And it's the same with him. Like, in one scene, he will have so many different like personality dynamics. Okay. Dating Dr. Dill? 4? 4. How am I giving it a 4? Like, this was kind of stupid. This book is so questionable. Here's what's fun about this, and something that I really enjoy is a main character who's going on a series of dates. There's the insertion of text messages. There's also these articles. There's this woman named Mrs. Gupta who's just writing an Indian abroad news column where she gossips about all the relationships and everything going on. So that's just really fun. But also she goes on a series of dates and looking at like all of the different profiles that she's reading, that we get to read, the initial contact that she's having with these men who are just like awful. Karina is really committed to having a love marriage, and she wants to give everybody a chance before she like falls back on Dr. Dill. And so she goes on these series of dates, and like all of them are terrible. Sometimes he shows up and like saves her from them. There's definitely questionable things as far as like controlling behavior, but also it's like balanced, because one of my favorite scenes, statements, perspectives in a book is where a love interest is very committed to the main character getting what they want. And especially when you're following somebody who has sacrificed a lot of things, or their family doesn't prioritize them, and their whole life they've felt like their opinion and wants don't matter. There's a love interest who's like, tell me what you want, like forget about everybody else, tell me what you want. And not only was that his support of her, but that also transitioned into the steamier scenes. At the end of the day, the dynamic was mostly fun and supportive and a good time. So even though some questionable things occurred, I think you could say that about every single book that I have read, including ones that I've rated higher than this. Something about it, it was charming enough for me to give it a 4. So there you go. Today's the day Colleen Hoover and I meet again. I think it's been 4 years since I read any of her new releases. I just got my Christmas tree today. I'm excited to decorate it. I almost just knocked it down. I'm gonna read this because I have some assumptions going into it that I'm like, this is gonna be my last time with Colleen Hoover. A quick look back in history. 7 years ago, I did a new adult project when I thought I was supposed to be reading new adult romance. I didn't like any of it, but one of the standout authors, or the only standout author, was Colleen Hoover. Though I dislike the majority of her books, there have been a couple standouts for me, though upon reread, a lot of them didn't hold up anyway. And I've discussed over the years that the things that Colleen Hoover's books did for me, I find in other genres now. Because something about me is I love a plot twist, and I always got that at the end of her books, but that's not something that I'm looking for in romance. And at this point in the journey, you know that I'm not looking for intense romance. My favorite book of hers isn't romance. Like, It Ends With Us is a fantastic book about cycles of abuse. It's heartbreaking. It's so raw, but it is not romance. And I have no interest in reading like the sequel to this that is an actual romance. So I'm glad that this was the one in the second spot. This is about a young mother who was in prison, and after 5 years, she returns to the town where her daughter lives with her grandparents, and she's trying to reconnect with her, which I think is a story that I could appreciate if it wasn't about a relationship, and the relationship wasn't something that I was supposed to care about. Like, I read enough general fiction and literary fiction and whatever else that has hard-hitting topics and has conversations that like I hope will be in here about the intent of the prison system, issues with the prison system. Maybe I'm giving this book too much credit, but like rehabilitation versus punishment, and how people respond and react to people who've been in prison, exploring if she should have access to this child, what's best for the child. But those aren't necessarily conversations that I want to exist within a romance, because I'll read it somewhere else. So let's get into it. We're reading from Ledger, who is in her daughter's life, and Kenna, who is the woman in the story. Okay, hear me out. At least I knew this was a bad idea. You know, like I went into it apprehensively. I shouldn't have done it. I knew I shouldn't have done it. I did it anyway. I regret it. I am, oh my God, 190 pages into this book. Nothing has happened. I just don't want people who love romance or love this book to come here and be like, you just didn't understand it. Maybe this book is for romance readers the way that, hear me out with this reference. It's the way that My Heart Is a Chainsaw is for me as a horror reader. Like, I recommend it to people, and then people who don't read horror pick it up and they're like, that was awful. And I'm like, you didn't understand. So now, as a not usually a romance reader, I pick this up and I'm like, why would anybody like this? And romance readers are like, you just don't get it. That That reference does check out though, because the first scene of My Heart is a Chainsaw is very much horror. It's scary, it's spooky right from the jump, and then it just gets really boring. And that's what happened in here for me. It started out with this like sexy scene of her coming to town and hooking up with this guy in his truck, and then they part, and then they both realize who the other person is, and that they both knew the guy who died. She's responsible for his death. And at this point, it's just been 190 pages of people saying she shouldn't have access to her daughter, and her saying, I wish I had access to my daughter. And the guy she's interested in, who's interested in her, is like, she's so hot, she should have access to her daughter. Sorry, that's not his actual line of thinking. Those are the two thoughts that he has for 190 pages. I'm tired. I'm so tired. The tree is done, the day is done, the book is done. I'm giving this a 2. I didn't like it, but at this point in the romance journey, we already knew that. This is just not my type of romance. And I think that's good to know. And I know people will say like the intent of it wasn't to be a romance, it's just, you know, a fiction book that happens to have some romance, but I didn't enjoy the way that the fiction part of it was explored, nor the romance. Kenna's state of mind is completely reasonable. The choices that she's making, it's understandable, seeing as she just spent 5 years in prison and she is so desperate to have different things in her life now. And so everything like makes sense. You can justify everything she's doing and thinking, but I prefer to read from a protagonist, especially if it's going to be first person. I just want to be in the mind of someone who's making logical decisions, who is going step by step through a plan rather than just the chaos. But if she did have that state of mind and she was thinking, how can I actually connect with my daughter? How can I reach out to these people in a way that makes me seem like I'm capable? Then we wouldn't have needed 300 pages. We had 300 pages of her wanting something, and then the last page she got that thing. Obviously it's going to end in a positive way because it's in the category that it is and people love it, so it's a feel-good book, though there's a lot of emotional turmoil to wade through to get there. If we look at Colleen Hoover's entire body of work, this would rank pretty lowly on like a book that actually has issues. I see why people could enjoy this and how it pulls on people's heartstrings. It just did nothing for me. And that doesn't mean situationally, it just means like writing wise. If that was a real person and it was a real situation, I would have emotional attachment. We're gonna move on to The Bodyguard because I just want something fun. So The Bodyguard is about a woman named Hannah who is a bodyguard to a superstar named Jack. He has a stalker and she works for this company who protects people. And it's not so much about like being big, strong bodyguards. It's about like risk assessment and entering an area and understanding all the places where a stalker could be hiding and setting up the surveillance and just being prepared for anything. And I think I'm gonna like that perspective. Is it first person? It is first person, one POV, and I've heard there's not much about him actually being famous like within the text. Okay, first of all, the amount of fake dating books that I'm getting to read and feeling like I like something that's popular, that's just fun. So she works for this agency who puts people in charge of different people who need protection. And this guy is like staying with his mother who's currently sick, and he has a stalker, so he needs security. So there's people like setting up cameras, there's like a team set up on the property. I'm just at the point, I guess it's a third of the way in, where they actually arrive at the house. We've gotten all the setup, we know everything about him, like she's gotten all the information for the job she's going to be doing. She's going to have to act as his girlfriend. He wants to protect his family, he doesn't want them to know he has a stalker, so he's just like bringing his girlfriend for the season. Second thing, highly recommend the audiobook. It's funny, I read the first 8 chapters physically, and then I was cleaning up some Christmas stuff and I decided to listen to chapter 7 and get used to the narrator's voice before going into a part I hadn't read yet. I don't know, I do that a lot, like overlap. And the same scene, I laughed out loud. Like the narrator just has such a style to this character's voice that I literally laughed out loud to an audiobook. I feel like that doesn't happen to me very often. But they were talking about like what is reasonable for them to do with their fake relationship, and that's my favorite thing. And they make a plan and they set guidelines. She's like so professional and she's not caught up in his fame, which is something I appreciate because I don't want to read about like a fangirl being like so grateful that like an actor or a singer or whatever showed her the time of day. Like I hate that perspective. They really don't seem into each other at this point, and I'm interested to see, you know what I'm most interested to see? I'm not gonna lie to the internet, how steamy it gets. This is so cheesy, and I'm having such a good time. Hannah is my favorite type of character to follow because she's so capable at her job, and since the book is really focused on the work that she's doing, I get to learn all about it and the projects that she's worked on in the past and all of the things that have led her to this place. We get some background on like her jujitsu training. She tries it out on him because he doesn't believe that she can take someone down, even though it's not even what she's supposed to be doing. And we also learn a lot about why she is even in this career in the first place, about her background, about the way she was raised. And then we also get some of him, like they connect on a bit of an emotional level. It is very much a rom-com, but he has had a tragedy in his family recently. That's what's taken him out of the limelight, but everybody still knows who he is. So there's a little bit of speculation and paparazzi and fan stuff going on, but not a ton. It's more about them just like hanging out. She has to be by his side all the time. So that includes like sharing a bed. And every single scene goes a little bit differently than I expect, because I've read the sharing one bed trope so many times, and this one's just very funny. Because he's like, you can sleep in my bed, and she's like, no, I'm not gonna make you sleep on the floor. And he's like, I wasn't offering to sleep on the floor, like we can both sleep in the bed. The stakes feel very low considering this is about a bodyguard and a stalker. That might be the fastest I've read a romance this entire, like in my lifetime. I couldn't stop, I couldn't put it down. I want the movie, I want to see it adapted. It was so fun, so cinematic. It did remain pretty low stakes until the end that got absolutely ridiculous. Like ridiculous. But I had a great time and there was zero steam. So the fact that I'm giving something 5 stars that had zero steam makes me take back all of the things that I said about my preferences. Whatever. I realized in the last clip I didn't finish my thought. I was saying that I love Hannah as a character because this type of character who's so capable and smart at her job and so good at it, and we learn all about the work dynamics, but then she's kind of a mess in real life, like that is just intriguing to me. Is that because that's how I feel about myself? Maybe. Like I'm gonna be professional, I've got it all together, but in reality, like I'm an awkward, stupid little idiot. Technically, I'm giving this a 4.75, and I'm gonna talk about in my spoiler video what I wish the book did, because there's one little gripe I have about him specifically, and one thing that I think the book could have done that would have made me respect it just a little bit more if it wasn't kind of putting other people down in order to make her look better. But it really was perfect. Like the amount I was laughing, the rom-com was calming. It's a very slow burn romance, I will say that, but the epilogue was like perfect, and I don't even love an epilogue usually. I accidentally bought another romance book. I have been watching some Hallmark Christmas movies with my husband, and since I don't feel like I have anything Christmassy in this video, maybe I can still get the Hallmark vibe. This is about a doctor and her family legacy. She's very important to her hospital, and she ends up in this small town where she falls in love with this guy who has a legacy of his own. He's the mayor of the town, but he also comes from a long line of mayors and people who live in this town. So they both have their roots, but she gets welcomed into this whole new world, and she's gonna leave the city life for the country life. This is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I think it's like Disney fairy tale inspired. And I say that to imply I don't think there's gonna be any steam in here, because they already had sex on like in the very first chapter, but we didn't get to see it, hear about it. Our main character Alexis just came from a funeral and ends up stopping in this small town and has this just very fun dynamic with a guy who helps her with her car. She ends up at the local bar and they have this very funny little encounter. They go home together, and then suddenly it's the next day. Okay, sorry, chapter 4, not chapter 1, when that act occurs. But we just jump in time to the next day where she's sneaking out and going back to her normal life. But it's dual POV, so we do get to hear from Daniel and the goat that he's babysitting and all of the town's people who are just so in love with him. It's a decently long one at 375 pages, so I think it'll be fun. It is literally 12 hours since I talked to you last. I forgot that I was filming this video, but here I am with an update. I'm almost done with it, and I don't want to talk about it because I have to discuss the fact that throughout this series, I've made certain realizations about my romance reading preferences. Some, but not all of those things include not enjoying age gaps, apparently, not enjoying books that have heavy topics, and not wanting to read a romance unless It's steamy. And now I'm about to give 4.5 stars to an age gap romance that's about abuse, that has closed door fade to black sex scenes. So now everything that I've learned, throw it out the window. We're back to square one. I'm having a really nice time with this. And what I think I enjoy that it's doing is it is about, oh my God, this woman in this terrible marriage. The relationship is over, but he has been very, especially like mentally abusive, and he won't get out of their house. He won't leave her alone, and they have to work together. And he's really close with her parents, her dad is awful, just an awful, awful human. And now I thought like Aladdin. I don't know why I was thinking Aladdin. Rob?
Yeah.
What's that Aladdin song about the world?
A Whole New World?
A Whole New World. I was thinking A Whole New World. That's not what that says. This is part of your world, which is the Little Mermaid. And she literally has red hair. So I've been looking for all of the Aladdin references. Haven't found too many of them, but now that I think about it, Little Mermaid makes sense. We've also had some references to like Cinderella. She lost a shoe at one point. It's not fairy tale, but it's clearly fairy tale inspired. There's even this element of like, just a little bit, but like the nature kind of reflecting people's moods, and that's just been very fun. But her dad, I guess, is probably reminiscent of, what's Ariel's dad's name in The Little Mermaid?
Triton.
Triton?
Triton.
Triton, thank you. Maybe King Triton. I haven't seen many Disney movies, but the references are like, she laughed like a Disney villain, or oh, I know those girls, they're the evil stepsisters. Just like little references like that. Anyway, it's feeling very opposites attract, which is fun. But oh my God, what I was saying so long ago, I feel like it's doing well is integrating the rough times throughout the entire story. It's not like some big twist at the end where we uncover this big hidden trauma, or her parents like literally will kill her for being with somebody. But her father and the legacy of the hospital is very important to him. He will like kick you out of the family. And she's also 10 years older than this guy who she's getting into a relationship with. So for every single reason, she doesn't think the relationship is reasonable. She wants to hide it from everybody. So there's this heaviness to the entire story. Maybe it's that I haven't read like an age gap that didn't involve somebody having a child, and like all of the pressures of that was intense to read. But it's also gotten really funny. I've laughed out loud. There was an entire little chapter about, while I say it's not explicit, there is some mentions of like his dick. He's talking about dick pics, and there was this whole scene where his friend like brought over a ring light for him to take a better picture. It sounds stupid, but it was precious, trust me. Yeah, so this one's gonna be a 4.25 star for me. It's got family obligations. We have a wealthy character who wants to help out the small town character, but he doesn't want any handouts. We've got a big cast of characters, clear villains and heroes, and I think this would make for a really fun movie. There was definitely conflict throughout the entire thing, but he was very much her like safe space. And he lived like 2 hours away, so she would have to go, and it was like entering a whole new world in this small town. And when he came into her world, it was such a mess. And since there was conflict throughout it, the third act drama didn't feel out of the blue. It didn't feel ridiculous. It was very much where the book was leaning. It felt very genuine and warm and just good. It was a really good book. If it was sexier, I think it could have gotten a 5. We've now come to the end of the video and the end of the video series. I don't want to drag this out any longer because this video is so long. So I am going to take the opportunity to talk about more learnings in the spoiler vlog that I referenced. But it's essentially going to be me rehashing everything that already happened in the series. If you do want to join my membership though, we're currently reading Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane as our besties book club pick for the season. So if you want to talk romance with me, that's happening. What we learned in this video specifically is that I've gone back on some of my opinions already formed in other episodes in this series. But no one at this point should be surprised that I am inconsistent and picky when it comes to this genre, because I'm the same with every other genre. Adding in these 2 books that I read in other episodes, I have read 10 of the 20 Goodreads nominees in the romance category, which isn't something I ever thought I'd be able to say. I'm just really glad I'm at a point in my life where I can enjoy romance. Of the 10, I definitely had some least favorites. I had some okay, good reads. I had a couple great reads, and I had a couple fantastic reads. The questions that I posed in the first video, can I enjoy adult romance? The answer is yes. What kind of romance do I prefer? The lighter, the rom-coms. But I do want an equal amount of steam. And through saying multiple times in the series that I want an equal amount of real life with the romance, people have been saying that they think that I'm looking for chick lit. I'm not. I just think a romance should be 400 plus pages, 300 of it romance. I want a romance, but 100 pages can be other stuff. Job-related conversations, friendships, self-reflection, family dynamics. The question of do I have to find the romantic interest appealing for myself to enjoy a romance? The answer is no, however, it helps. I think a big learning for me is actually that I'm much more sensitive to power dynamics within relationships than I even realized, which is something I'm going to talk through further there. And the final question of the list of things that I enjoy in other books, will I also enjoy those in romance-centric books? And it's a yes. Book-related books, small towns, competitions, big friendship groups. The only thing I don't think I ticked off is timeline hopping or multiple timelines, which isn't something I even realized until just now. All of these books were so easy to read, and I wonder if there was a little more complexity. If there was timeline hopping or we got to see the same couple at different points in their journey, would that improve a romance for me or would that distract me from what I'm enjoying? I still have so much to read and learn within romance, and I'm excited to continue doing that. I appreciate all the recommendations that have come in throughout this week. Thank you so much for watching and engaging with my content. I appreciate you for being here. I hope you stick around. The next vlog you see from me is going to be reading another Goodreads Choice Awards list. So I'll see you then. Bye!